Well, this is the time of year when Australians usually dust off their cricketing skills and try to notch that elusive 100 in the backyard at mum's. But could the growing use of screens spell the end of this great Australian tradition? Joining me now is Professor Jason Bainbridge from the Arts and Design Faculty at the University of Canberra. Jason, thanks for your time. Is backyard cricket under threat?
Well, it's part of the changing way in which we're spending our leisure time. I think that, as you say, we're seeing more and more use of screens and devices, and people have got used to that during the pandemic. And now we're seeing some of those streaming providers actually targeting the Christmas season for some big releases in a similar way to we'd see traditional cinema chains releasing the blockbusters at certain times of year. So certainly there's a competition on, I think, for the hearts and minds of those at home at Christmas and whether they're going outdoors or spending most of the day on the couch.
Are we seeing children become less active through the holiday period than they might have been, say, 20 or 30 years ago?
Well, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? When we talked about streaming services originally, part of the appeal was that they were on demand. So they were always there when you wanted them to be. But what's actually happening in practice is that kind of fear of missing out, that if you don't see something as soon as it drops, then you'll be behind, whether you're an adult or a child, you'll be missing out on what everyone else is watching. So there's this kind of added pressure to watch and engage more than what we've seen previously. And this has led to some people focusing more on a release date for a film or TV series, perhaps, than some physical activity. I think the other factor here too is we're still coming out of the pandemic. When we got used to engaging in more indoor activities, we got used to relying on these streaming services for our forms of entertainment. So it's an interesting time to try and gauge whether we're really returning to outdoors, including backyard cricket over the Christmas break.
If I think about my own experience, I mean, I spent almost every day of every summer playing cricket in the backyard with my dad and my brother. But if I look at my own kids, you know, they're basketball fanatics rather than cricket fans. Are we seeing a move away from cricket to other sports such as basketball? And is that being driven in any way by the fact that, you know, my kids, for example, you know, they can spend forever watching any NBA game or any American sport, as opposed to, you know, when I was a kid, basically, you know, Test and one-day cricket was pretty much all that was available on the TV.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, the access to American sports has never been greater than what it currently is. I mean, we can see the cricket actually trying to compete with some of that, with bringing in different variations of cricket to try to appeal to younger audiences as well. I think, though, what we're seeing overall is just that involvement of devices so much in people's lives that it's very hard to start moving towards activities where you don't have a device. So even when we talk about streaming things on television, often young people particularly are engaged in what we call distracted viewing. That is, they're on their phone, they've got the TV on the background, they're moving between different screens. When you bring in an element like physical competition through sport, then obviously you've got to focus on that and you can't be on another screen. And that's where we're seeing that kind of, I suppose, physical sport losing out a bit in terms of what young people are interested in, because they can engage in multiple screens at the same time. And you can't do that when you're playing sport. So I think you're right. It's access to American sports. It's interest in American sports. It's being able to follow American sports and the players online in between the actual matches and competitions. But it's also that idea of distracted viewing, that you can still use your phone, be talking to your mates, doing other things, which when you're engaged in a physical activity like sport is harder to do.
So what's the fix here? Because every parent wants to get their kid off the screen and out into the backyard, whether it's playing a game of footy, a game of cricket, a game of basketball. How do we do that?
I think actually, again, I'd go back to the pandemic. I mean, we've seen at university, so many students are happy to be back in the classroom, coming to university events, hanging out with their colleagues, because they weren't able to do that much over the last 24 months. And I think there's a real opportunity to remind young people particularly of that, and thinking about how you engage away from your device and the benefits of that overall, obviously for a healthy lifestyle, but also just for communication practices and novelty. I mean, there is a point at which, you know, I think we're all over our Zoom meetings and our phone calls and our you know, relying on the device during the pandemic. I think it's still a captured moment where we can remind young people of that and the opportunities to engage in other ways, whether that's going out for a walk, going out for a bike ride with mates, playing sport. And I think that's a real opportunity. The other thing is Christmas itself is a great break point in traditional cycles where you do tend to hang out with the family, have a bit of a break from whatever you're normally doing. So I think the Christmas period is a great opportunity to reset away from the screens, away from the devices, and actually just hang out and play some board games, go out and play cricket, go out and go for a bike ride. It's a great opportunity for all of that, particularly the weather we've got coming up at the moment.
Yeah, there is no doubt about that. Well, Jason Bainbridge, thanks for your time. Hopefully over the next week or so you get a chance to go out and knock up a few runs in the backyard.